Two men dragged a girl into the night. Just as hope slipped away, three lions emerged from the shadows, not as hunters, but as guardians. This is the story of the night the wild itself rose to protect a stolen child. Before this night, Ababa's world had been small but full. Her name meant flower in Amharic, a name her father had chosen when she was born during the short rainy season, when wild blossoms carpeted the hills. She was quick-footed and curious, with a voice that could carry across the fields when she laughed. Life was simple. Mornings at the river, afternoons helping her mother grind grain, evenings by the fire listening to stories. It was a world where danger felt far away. That illusion would shatter in an instant. The morning of her abduction began like any other. The sky was washed in soft blue, the air still cool from the night. Ababa balanced a woven basket on her back, heading down the narrow footpath toward the river. She greeted an old woman carrying a bundle of firewood, waved at two boys chasing a goat. The world felt safe, predictable, but halfway to the river the birds fell silent. A prickle ran down her spine. She glanced to her left, nothing. To her right, just tall grass swaying in the breeze. She quickened her pace. That's when the first man stepped into her path. He was tall and lean, his clothes dusty, his eyes unreadable. Before she could turn, another man came from behind. Shorter, broader, breathing hard. A rough hand clamped over her mouth. Another seized her arm. The basket slid from her shoulders, landing with a dull thud on the hard earth. Her sandals scraped against stones as they pulled her off the path. She tried to scream, but her voice was smothered by the man's hand. Thorns tore at her calves as they forced her deeper into the scrub. She twisted, kicked, clawed, but the men didn't loosen their grip. The sound of the river faded. By midday, when Ababa had not returned, her mother began pacing near the hut, glancing down the river path every few seconds. By late afternoon, her father's voice had grown low and urgent as he asked neighbors if they'd seen her. Within the hour, half the village knew. Men gathered in the center, their faces tense. A few had spears. Some had rifles so old they were patched with cloth. The elders spoke quickly, their voices tight. "This is no accident. We must go now." Every moment lost meant the trail grew colder. The kidnappers stopped only when darkness swallowed the sky. They tied her to a small tree, the rope biting into her wrists. They lit no fire, afraid, perhaps, of being seen. One tore off a piece of dried bread and tossed it to her. Another handed her a tin of water. She didn't touch either. Her throat was tight, her stomach knotted. She stared upward at the scattering of stars through the branches and whispered a prayer so softly she could barely hear it herself. "God, please send someone." Somewhere in the night, a jackal barked. The men shifted uneasily. By torchlight, the villagers fanned out, their shadows stretching long against the ground. They moved in lines, calling her name into the darkness. "Ababa! Ababa!" The sound was swallowed by the hills, bounced back at them as faint echoes. Every rustle in the grass made them raise their weapons. The night was vast, and somewhere out there, the girl was moving farther away. The next day was worse. The sun blazed overhead, baking the earth. The men kept a brutal pace, forcing her to stumble along behind them. Her feet bled where the skin had torn. Thorns scratched her legs. They spoke little, except for tense bursts of conversation, about ransom, about keeping her hidden, about avoiding roads. At one point they froze, knives drawn, at the distant whoop of hyenas. Ababa's breath caught. The sound faded and they moved on. But something had changed in the air. Far away, a lioness stopped mid-step. Her ears swiveled toward a faint sound. Sharp, high, irregular. It stirred something in her instincts. Behind her, two male lions paused, their tails flicking. The sound came again. Not the call of prey, not the chatter of monkeys. Something else. Something like a cub in distress. They began to move toward it. The kidnappers were moving her again when the first low growl rolled through the air. It was not close, but it was powerful enough to make the men stiffen. The second growl came closer. The ground seemed to hum with it. One man gripped Ababa's arm tighter. The other scanned the grass, eyes wide. The tall grass shifted. The lioness emerged first, her golden coat catching the last of the day's light. She walked with slow, measured steps. Behind her, two males appeared. One's mane was dark and heavy, the other's lighter but just as thick. Both had eyes that glowed like molten amber. They didn't rush, they didn't snarl, they simply came. Eo! The men shouted, waved sticks, and hurled stones. The lioness didn't blink. One man fired a shot into the air. The echo cracked through the evening, but the lions didn't move. The lioness stepped in front of Abeba, her body a shield. One male circled wide, cutting off the men's escape route. The other took position behind her, eyes locked on the kidnappers. It was now 3 against 2, and the lions weren't the ones afraid. The growl that followed was deeper than the earlier ones, a sound that seemed to come from the center of the earth. The men glanced at each other, faces pale. Then they bolted, crashing into the brush, not daring to look back. Their footsteps faded into the distance. Zomps. The lions didn't leave. The lioness lay down beside Abeba, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from her side. Her breathing was steady, like a drumbeat. One male settled on a rise, scanning the darkness beyond. The other paced in a slow circle, his tail swishing, his head low. When hyenas called nearby, the male on the rise unleashed a roar that rattled Ababa's bones. The night grew still again. The first light of day turned the grass to gold. The search party, weary and sore, followed the trail of footprints, human and animal, deeper into the bush. When they saw the clearing ahead, they slowed. Ababa stood in the clearing, her wrists still bound, her hair tangled, but her eyes wide and alive. Around her lay the 3 lions, calm as if they had been waiting. When the men approached, the lions rose. The lioness glanced at Ababa one last time, then turned. The males followed her into the tall grass, their shapes melting into the landscape until they were gone. The village erupted when they returned. Women wailed in relief, children clung to her legs, her mother's tears soaked her hair. Her father pressed his forehead to hers, whispering words only she could hear. The elders listened to her story, their expressions shifting from disbelief to wonder. The story traveled far beyond the village, across Ethiopia, then around the world. Some called it divine intervention. Others said it was instinct, her cries mimicking the sound of a lion cub in trouble. Abeba said only this: "They heard me, they came, they stayed." And somewhere, in the highlands, 3 lions once made a choice no one could explain. The Ethiopian highlands, vast and ancient, continue to hold their secrets, but one truth now echoes across their plains. A young girl was saved by lions. This incredible tale leaves us with a profound sense of awe, a renewed belief in the extraordinary, and an enduring hope for the harmonious coexistence of all living beings.